Hey everybody, it's Jason from the Texas Gun Vault, and once again I'm coming to you with another Texas Gun Vault poll question of the week. This is a weekly vlog that I put out where I ask you as my viewers and subscribers about something that deals with guns, gun culture, politics, current events, the news, or something fun like EDC that I'd like to get your thoughts and opinions on. And today's question deals with guns. I know a lot of people like to talk about the news and politics, but really the main focus of my channels is firearms and the love of firearms and the mechanics of firearms and the history of firearms. And so I absolutely love this topic. And today we're going to be talking about the M16, or if you're a civilian like I am, pretty much the 20-inch barreled versions of the AR platform that kind of have the same furniture and features as their full auto military counterparts. And which one is better? The M16, while it might be the longest serving rifle of the United States, it's gone through a couple of different generations. And I think that maybe the answers to this might be generational as well. And maybe what you grew up on, what you've shot in the past, or if you have served this nation, you might look back on your old battle rifle and go, that's the one, that's the best. But I was curious what you all thought. I have my personal opinions as a gun collector, but I want to see what you guys had to say. So with all that said, let's dive right into this week's question. For this week's question, I want to get back to talking about the mechanics of guns. I'm a fan of the M16 rifle, or the 20-inch barreled AR-15s, and was wondering which variation of the rifle you think is superior. I know the M16 has been replaced by the M4 in most situations, but the United States Marine Corps still uses the M16A4. So which version of the M16 is best? Tell me why you think so in the comments. And for the purposes of today's poll, we're going to stick with the main variants, the A1, A2, A3, and A4. Now I know when it comes to other guns like the M4, and even with some of the M16s, there are some specialty variants that were made for very special circumstances. But for the most part, we're going to be talking about the rifles that were issued to the main infantry and the way that they traditionally came. Now I know when it comes to some of these, people are going to say, well, they were outfitted differently for these situations. We're not talking about what could be done once they were in the hands of the soldiers. We're talking about the way that the military issued them and which one is best. And as I said, I think some of this might be generational. Some of it might come from a bias. I know I do because I love historical firearms, but some of you guys might have carried these in the military. So with all that said, let's dive right in and see what your results are for this week. With an even 100 votes, we have the M16A1, lightweight, triangle handguards, safe, semi-full, 23%. The M16A2, heavier, but better rear sight, safe semi, and 3-round burst, 13%. M16A3, same as the A2, but with safe semi and full. And the M16A4, flat top upper, Knight's armament rail, safe semi, and 3-round burst, 40%. And I have to be very honest, the results of this poll kind of surprised me because I know who subscribes to my channels, and often it's older people and people that served in the military and like retro guns. So I kind of thought the A1 was going to win out. Now each one of these variations I think do have great pros and cons. None of these is the ultimate perfect rifle. You know, one of the things I've noticed when it comes to reviewing guns is every option that a gun company puts on or decides to use will have some type of detraction. You can't add something without taking something away. A pro will always have a con, and everything is about compromise and balance. And sometimes I've always felt the U.S. military, when it comes to upgrading guns, is trying to provide an answer in search of a problem. Sometimes there is no problem, but they got to change something. Maybe they just got to make sure that those engineers still have jobs in the future. But let's go through each one of these and let's talk about them, and I'll give you guys my personal opinions and show a couple of guns from my collection that maybe you haven't seen before. First, we have the M16A1, lightweight, triangle handguards, safe, semi, full. So I brought out my Colt Retro M16A1 clone. I absolutely love this rifle. And for me, this is the iconic M16. This is the one you see in all those Vietnam War movies. This was the first one that was as close, I think, as the military ever issued to Eugene Stoner's original design. Of course, the Army had to have that forward assist, and Eugene Stoner did not like that. But some big features about this rifle I love. I love these triangle handguards. For me, they're just very ergonomic. They feel great. They look great. I always preferred the A1 style grip as well. It does not have a groove here between your fingers. I always like the A1 stock length as well. But for me, the biggest advantage to the A1 is how light it is. And if you've ever watched documentaries on the history of the M16 and the AR-15, that is what was the real revolutionary aspect of this rifle. How light it was. Coming from the M14, this thing felt like a toy, and I understand why many of the soldiers that were issued this called it the Mattel 16, because it's made of aluminum and plastic, very different than the steel and wood of that M14. But man, is it light as compared to every other variant. Even the M4s and the carbines and the short-barreled rifles, this 20-inch barreled AR-15, it's so light. And that's what I think is so innovative about the design. And I really feel like we have gone so far away from that with all the additions of optics and accessories and rails and handguards. They just get really heavy. And as I have heard from people that have served in the military, ounces become pounds when you have to carry this stuff around. And I really think Eugene Stoner knocked it out of the park when it comes to this rifle. It's one of my favorite variations from both an aesthetic and a function standpoint. Then we have the M16A2, heavier, better rear sight, safe, semi, and 3-round burst. Now, this is where I think the first big controversy came in the M16, is going to that 3-round burst. I understand why the military did it, because it saves ammunition. When people are in the field and they're under stress and they have a fully automatic rifle, their tendency is to panic. You're going to pull that trigger and hold it back until you are out of ammunition. And that is wasteful and can put you in a bad spot. So that's why they put the 3-round burst in them. So I think for a lot of soldiers, that was the big detraction. Now, as a civilian, we don't have to deal with that because these are all semi-automatic only. And for this, I brought out a gun that I built as a clone of an M16A2. This actually has an FN factory surplus upper. So this one was originally designated for the US military. It has all the proper technical data package markings on it. And the lower receiver is a Bushmaster. So it's kind of an A2 clone, but I wanted to build something with this because, as I said, it's a surplus FN upper receiver. Everything on the upper is exactly like it would be in the military. Now, a huge advantage, I think, functionally on the A2 that I do like is the handguard. Even though they're not as cool as the A1, functionally they're better. You have these ribs right here, which of course give you a little bit better gripping surface. But from an armorer standpoint, the big advantage is that these two pieces, the upper and top part of the shell, are exactly the same. Where on the M16A1 you have a right and a left, and it's two separate parts. In fact, if you ever try to buy old furniture from older guns, you'll find that a lot of times one side is missing because they would crack. In fact, the way that they were put in the racks in the barracks damaged those handguards, and because of that, many times one side is cracked. And because they're two separate parts, that can be a little bit harder to source. But when they went to this handguard, it's the same up and bottom, so it doesn't matter if one side breaks, it's the same part. So from their perspective, it's easier, it has better grip. It definitely works. I think the heat shield is a little bit nicer in it, but I still like the aesthetics of the A1. Something I don't like about this is the heavier barrel. As you can see, the profile of this barrel is heavier. They also went to a 1-in-7 twist, where the original M16A1s were 1-in-12 twist. They went to a government profile barrel. Now, underneath this handguard, it is thinner in the barrel profile, but out here, it is thicker. And that adds some weight to the front of this thing, which I'm not a big fan of, as I mentioned. They did redo the upper receiver, and you have still the carry handle, but this A2 rear sight is by far superior. You do have adjustments for elevation and for windage, where on the original A1s, you only had windage. They also lengthened the stock a little bit, which I'm okay with, but it kind of surprises me because most of the time, if you're in the military, you got a lot of stuff on you, and having a longer stock when you have maybe plate carriers or other equipment on and big heavy uniforms, that might make the length of pull just a little bit too long. I've always preferred that A1 length. And then there's the grip. Now I can handle these grips, but not everybody likes them because of this little finger groove right here. I still think the A1 is superior. So from a civilian standpoint, I definitely think the A2 is a better rifle from a function standpoint, but the A1 still wins when it comes to the coolness and the aesthetic factor. But then we move on to the A3. The same as the A2, but with safe, semi, and full automatic. And a lot of soldiers wanted this, a lot of units wanted this. They missed the fact that you didn't have a full auto option, because really 3-round burst is not a machine gun. I know according to US law it is, but a 3-round burst isn't. I was always fascinated that they weren't able to figure out a really cool trigger pack for these things like HK did for their guns. Because if you don't know, in some of the MP5s you had safe, semi, burst, and full auto. There had to have been a way to do that to satisfy everybody. But pretty much the A3s look exactly the same. They had pretty much the same upper receivers. The only real difference was the full auto capability. Now, if I had an option to own any one of these and get to vote in this poll, this is probably the one I would have voted for, because it'd probably be the most fun. You get the functionality of the better handguard, the better sights, and probably in full auto, having that little bit of a heavier barrel is an advantage with the 1-in-7 twist. But if I had the money to buy a civilian transferable machine gun, I definitely would want an A3 over an A2. Not that I wouldn't take an A2, it's still cool as heck. In fact, one of my SOT friends has an A2 that is unfired with DoD acceptance marks. That's a pretty darn sweet rifle. But I think I would still prefer the full auto option. If you're gonna have a machine gun, you might as well have a machine gun. And that brings us to the last iteration of the M16. And let me grab the other rifle here I want to show you. Now, a lot of you guys are going to say, hey, that is an FN Military Collector's Edition A4 clone. And actually, it is not. This is another upper receiver that I was able to procure at a gun show. And this is an FN manufactured right off the assembly line for the military surplus upper receiver. Now, that handguard is not a Knights Armament. It's actually a P&S Products, which is the company that underbid Knights Armament for their own rail and can produce it cheaper. So that is a P&S Products rail and vertical foregrip. So with all these rail covers on here, we now have a quad rail, so the military can put a whole bunch of accessories. We do have obviously the flat top upper, so now we have scopes and all various kinds of red dots, but pretty much the lower receiver goes back to what we had when it comes to the A2, back to 3-round burst. Now, obviously, this won the majority of votes in this poll, and I pretty much understand why. I think it's two factors. There are a few people that watch my channel and do vote on these polls that have served in the military, and this was the rifle, if they were shooting the M16, that they shot. But also because of modern battlefield tactics and just the way the gun world has turned. We all are into the optics, we're into the lights, we're into the lasers, we're into the night vision. Well, you can't put much of that on those other rifles, but on this one, you can. But for me, the biggest attraction away from this is that it's really heavy. Not that it's unwieldy, it's just so far away from the original design of the M16. Personally, I think if they were going to go with another A5, or upgrade the current editions, they should go with something that is more lightweight like the A1, maybe something with a pencil barrel. I think it should be in full auto, and have a rail option. So kind of mix and blend the A4 and the A1 rifles. But I understand why so many people like the A4. Now this lower receiver, in case you're wondering on this clone, is another Bushmaster A2 lower. So this is one of my M16 A4 clones. Really glad to have this upper receiver. As I said, it's a surplus upper. Absolutely love it. But I understand why everyone loves this thing, because of all of the options that you can have and how modular it is. One thing you should know is that if you do have an A1 variant, you can put on many of these handguards, because even guns like the A2 do have the triangle cap on this thing. So you can put triangle handguards on the M16A2, or you can put on more modern options on the other ones. They are reverse compatible, so that's really important to know. But as I said, I would have voted for the M16A3. If I could own one, that's probably the variant that I would go with. I think it's still classy, you get the full auto, and you get some upgrades that I really like. But when it comes to an aesthetic choice, the M16A1 has them beat, and from a historical standpoint, I think it's the closest to what Eugene Stoner intended, and there's so much to say about that. I'm just telling you, if you ever get a chance to shoot an M16A1 or an AR-15A1 type of gun, you really should. When you hold that thing, you realize it's very different than the modern ARs we have today. It is so light and it is so pleasurable to shoot. And I still think it was a game changer when it came to our combat soldiers. It had to have been, going from the M14 to the M16A1. And I think that's just so cool. But from my perspective, the M16A3 just wins. But you guys thought it was the A4. So maybe we don't agree on everything, and that's okay. But speaking about not agreeing, let's see what you guys had to say with the top rated comments of the week. And I do have to say, I am a little bit disappointed in you guys. I know this wasn't a very controversial topic, but I only got 4 comments this week. Normally the top rated comments are the top 5. So I guess everyone who commented is going to get a shout out today. We're going to start off today with Brian Edgett 2134, who said, Jason, I think the flat top rifle is a more useful platform. It allows you to run optics and sights that fold down out of the way. The rail has been used for years now, and we have seen its development. Absolutely, obviously he would have voted for the A4 variant, and most likely in the modern battlefield, the A4 makes the most sense. Then we have Tactical Cowboy 3252, who says, I take the A4 for ease of optics and attachments, but would rather have it safe semi-auto. So maybe A3 with the rail interface. And that's kind of what I was saying. The A3 is, I think, the superior rifle, and you can change out that handguard. In fact, I actually have an AR-15 that I kind of did the same thing with. It still has a carry handle upper, but I did put on a P&S Products rail on it. Then we have Super FC Smith, who says, as a guy in his 70s, I will always honor those soldiers who were holding the original M16A1 on their last day on Earth while fighting communism in Vietnam. And as I was saying, some of this is probably going to be a generational thing. But for me, when it comes to the iconic photo of that soldier's cross, you know, with the boots and the rifle, yeah, it's got to be an M16A1. It just has that right look. And then finally we have Joe Morgan, Eat My Shorts channel, who said A2 was where it's at, but if I had my rathers, I'd drop a A1 fire controls in it. So once again, he wants an A2, so he thinks a rifle like this is the best option, but still wants that full auto capability. So I think a lot of people agree with me on that. So that is the Texas Gun Vault poll question of the week, asking you guys about M16 rifles. It didn't get a lot of traction, as I said. I know a lot of people like to talk current events and politics, but I'll probably talk about something like that in our next poll. And speaking of the next poll, if you'd like to participate, please go to the community tab of my YouTube channel. I will also put a link in the comment section and the description. Go over there, see what the poll is about, vote, comment, and like other people's comments so we can get the top rated comment of the week. And I appreciate you guys being here watching this, especially if you like AR-15s, the 20-inch barreled versions, and M16s. And what do you guys think about my clones? I absolutely love collecting these rifles and building them out and making them look like they're supposed to. So let me know what you think in the comments section below. And as always, thanks for watching.